Dr. Fauci, pivoting back to the U.S., you started the interview in your first answer making a plea to encourage as many to get vaccinated as possible. Similar tone and message that you delivered last time you joined us a month or so ago. And I just wondered how optimistic you were that we will really meaningfully see a pickup in the percentage of the population that's fully vaccinated. Because, you know, we've crossed 50%. That's pretty good. You know, aren't we always to expect it to plateau after you kind of cross those levels?
You know, Wilfred, a couple of different things have happened and are really in motion right now. For example, we went from a couple of million people a day vaccinating. We went down to around 250,000. And then when things started to really go bad, a certain segment of the unvaccinated started to realize that, you know, we're in trouble. We better get vaccinated. And we're now, the last few days, have gone up to like 1 million people. So we peaked up, we went down, and now we're back up. Next thing is that as soon as the vaccines get fully approved by the FDA, which we hope is going to be very soon, two things are going to happen. People are going to say, well, I was waiting all along to get the full approval. Now that it is, I'll get vaccinated. I think you're going to have a certain proportion of the people who were not vaccinated are going to do that. Next, what will happen is that you will find enterprises, organizations empowered to start mandating vaccines, such as universities and colleges saying, if you want to attend in person, you have to be vaccinated. You will have places of employment, particularly big organizations that employ hundreds of thousands of people, will be saying, if you want to work for us, you've got to get vaccinated. They were hesitant to do that before because you didn't have the backup of a full approval of the vaccination. So I think we can put a dent in that group of people who are thus far not getting vaccinated, that they will now come along and get vaccinated.
The other area I wanted to ask Dr. Fauci was about the possible percentage of the population with antibodies in the U.S. There's been some analysis here in the UK, some of which is purely anecdotal, that suggests the peak in Delta came and went quite quickly, perhaps because the football tournament and other aspects were held here, leading to a higher level of herd immunity than just the fact that over 60% versus 50% in the US are fully vaccinated, and maybe as much as 80–90% have antibodies of some form. Do we have any data on that in the US, and could it be lower than it is here in the UK?
You know, that's a very good point. It is conceivable, but I want to underscore that we don't know for sure that the combination of the high level of vaccinations in the UK together with the high level of infections that they've experienced has gotten to the point you have a substantial proportion of people relatively protected. We don't know that. You know, we've counted on peaks that have occurred and then gone down, and people incorrectly have said, we've now reached herd immunity, we're okay, only to find another peak that followed that was even worse than the previous one. So we better be careful that we make assumptions about that. The one thing we do know is that vaccines protect. That's the one thing we do know, which is the reason why, with all the guessing and the surmising about is it this factor or that factor, the one thing that we're certain of is what vaccines can and will do.
So is it safe to take our unvaccinated kids, Dr. Fauci, on vacation on planes right now?
You know, again, it really depends where you're going, where you're coming from, the level of infection. Right now, travel is a situation where we know that in the process of travel, you know, the lines at the airport and things like that, planes themselves, when you look at it, seem to be relatively safe. One of the things you want to do when you have unvaccinated children, you do two things. You surround them with people who are vaccinated, such as in the school system, which is why we want all the teachers and the personnel in the school to be vaccinated. And then when you have people like younger children who can't be vaccinated, that's why you want to wear masks, to protect yourselves and to prevent you from infecting them.
But what do we know about Delta-infected kids? How sick are they getting? Any hospitalizations? What can you tell us about this? And why isn't the CDC telling us about this kind of data?
Well, when you look at what's happening in pediatric hospitals throughout the country, you have to factor in the situation with Delta. Delta is a very highly transmissible virus. So without a doubt, we are seeing more of anybody who's unvaccinated getting infected. And that includes children. So this idea that children don't get infected or children don't transmit, that's not the case with Delta. And quantitatively, the more children that will get infected, there will be a certain proportion of them. It will be a small proportion, but there will be a proportion of them that will get seriously ill and will be in the hospital, which is the reason why when you go around in the red hot zones, the places where there's a lot of transmission, you find that in the pediatric hospitals, you have a lot more children who are in the hospital, not only with COVID-19, but with other respiratory infections like respiratory syncytial virus. So children are not exempt from getting severe disease, even though, relatively speaking, when you compare them with people like the elderly or adults, they are less likely to get severe disease, but not so completely exempt that you don't see a lot of them in the hospital.